A Shadowed Inheritance. The title itself seemed to whisper secrets of the past, secrets that were now Aboud's to uncover. Aboud never knew his grandfather. The man in the photograph was a stranger, a ghost from a time long before his own. The old man, a recluse, a whisper of a name, had died. His life was shrouded in mystery, his presence a mere shadow in the family history. Now the mansion was his. Aboud stood before it, feeling the weight of its history pressing down on him. Aboud, a young man alone in the world, was drawn to the inheritance he'd never expected. It was a connection to a past he had never known, a link to a family he had never met. The lawyer's words echoed in his ears. "Your grandfather left everything to you. Everything." The words were both a gift and a burden, a promise of something more. The word was heavy with unspoken things, with secrets that clung to the old house like cobwebs. Each room seemed to hold a story, each corner a hidden truth. Aboud drove through the night, a single headlight cutting through the darkness towards the unknown. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was a journey he felt compelled to take. As he drove, Aboud's mind raced with questions. Who was his grandfather really? What secrets did the old mansion hold? And why had he been chosen to inherit it all? He remembered fleeting stories his mother had told him, tales of a distant grandfather who had once been a vibrant part of the family, before retreating into solitude. Arriving at the mansion, Aboud felt a mix of anticipation and dread. He turned the key in the lock, the sound echoing in the stillness of the night. The door creaked open to reveal a grand hallway filled with shadows and memories. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and forgotten times. Aboud walked through the mansion, each step taking him deeper into the past. The walls seemed to whisper his grandfather's name, urging him to uncover the truth. In the library, he discovered a hidden door behind a bookshelf. It was a secret passageway, leading to a part of the house that had been long forgotten. Inside, he found an old journal, its pages filled with his grandfather's handwriting. The journal was a window into a life he had never known, a life filled with secrets and mysteries. As he read, Aboud began to piece together the story of his grandfather's life. It was a tale of love and loss, of dreams and regrets, of a man who had lived in the shadows but had left a legacy of light. Standing by the window, Aboud felt a sense of connection to the man he had never known. The mansion was no longer just an inheritance. It was a bridge to his past, a key to his future. As the first light of dawn broke over the mansion, Aboud knew that his journey was just beginning. The shadows of the past had given way to the promise of a new day, and with it, the hope of uncovering the true legacy of his shadowed inheritance. The mansion on the hill. The house loomed, a gothic silhouette against the dying light. It was more than a house, really. A mansion, a castle, a fortress of secrets. Ivy crawled up its walls like grasping hands. Aboud stopped the car, the engine ticking in the silence. He stepped out, a chill wind whipping around him. He could almost feel the house watching him, its windows dark and empty like the eyes of a skull. Dust and echoes. The air inside was stale, thick with the scent of dust and time. Aboud stepped cautiously, his footsteps echoing in the vast hall. Cobwebs clung to the ornate chandeliers and shadows danced in the flickering light of his phone. He ran a hand along a dusty table. It felt cold beneath his touch, as if the house itself was reluctant to be disturbed. He was alone here, with the ghosts of the past and the secrets they held. A night like no other. The sky was a deep, inky black, dotted with stars that seemed to twinkle with a knowing glint. The mansion stood tall and foreboding, its silhouette cutting a stark contrast against the night sky. It was a place that had seen better days, its grandeur now faded, replaced by an air of mystery and unease. He chose a room at random, its four-poster bed draped in dusty velvet. The curtains, once a rich, deep red, were now faded and tattered, hanging limply by the windows. The room had an air of neglect, as if it had been forgotten by time itself. He could almost hear the echoes of the past, the whispers of those who had once walked these halls. The furniture was heavy, ancient, smelling faintly of beeswax and decay. Each piece seemed to tell a story, a silent witness to the passage of time. The wooden surfaces were covered in a thick layer of dust, undisturbed for years. He ran his fingers over the intricate carvings, feeling the rough texture beneath his fingertips. It was as if the room was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. He tried to ignore the feeling of being watched, the prickling sensation on the back of his neck. It was an unsettling feeling, one that made his skin crawl. He glanced over his shoulder, half expecting to see a shadowy figure lurking in the corners. But there was nothing there, only the oppressive darkness that seemed to close in around him. He shook his head, trying to dispel the unease that had settled over him. Sleep was a long time coming. He lay in the bed, staring up at the ceiling, his mind racing with thoughts. The bed was uncomfortable, the mattress lumpy and uneven. He tossed and turned, trying to find a position that would allow him to drift off. But every time he closed his eyes, he could feel the weight of the house pressing down on him, a constant reminder of its presence. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the wind against the window pane sounded like a whisper. The house seemed to be alive, its very structure groaning and shifting in the darkness. He could hear the wind howling outside, rattling the windows and sending shivers down his spine. It was as if the house was trying to communicate with him, to tell him its secrets. He pulled the covers up to his chin, trying to block out the sounds, but they only grew louder, more insistent. The house was alive, he was sure of it, and he was beginning to understand the whispers about his grandfather's eccentricities. He had always thought the stories were just that, stories. But now, lying in the darkness, he could feel the truth of them. The house had a presence, a personality, and it was watching him. He could almost hear his grandfather's voice, telling him to be careful, to respect the house and its history. He knew he had to be cautious, to tread lightly, for the house was not just a building, but a living, breathing entity. And it had its own rules, its own way of doing things. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the night ahead, knowing that this was just the beginning of his journey into the unknown. A noise woke him, a scratching, dragging sound coming from just beyond his door. He held his breath, listening. The sound came again, closer this time, followed by a soft thump. His heart pounded in his chest. He crept out of bed, grabbing the heavy candlestick from the bedside table. His hand trembled as he reached for the doorknob. He took a deep breath and threw the door open. The hallway was empty. He couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. In the flickering light of his phone, the portraits lining the walls seemed to follow him with their eyes. Their expressions were unreadable, their lips curved in faint, knowing smiles. He stopped before one portrait, a man with his grandfather's piercing blue eyes. The man in the painting seemed to stare right through him, his gaze heavy with unspoken words. Aboud could almost hear his grandfather's voice, a low murmur in the silence. He found himself drawn to the library. It was as if an invisible thread was pulling him towards the grand entrance, compelling him to step inside. The library had always been a place of solace for him, a sanctuary where he could lose himself in the pages of countless books. The room was vast, with floor-to-ceiling shelves crammed with books. Each shelf seemed to tell its own story, filled with volumes that spanned centuries. The sheer number of books was overwhelming, yet inviting. He felt a sense of awe as he gazed at the towering shelves, each one a testament to the knowledge and stories contained within. The scent of old paper and leather filled the air, a comforting aroma in the unsettling silence of the house. It was a smell that brought back memories of his childhood, of afternoons spent reading in his grandfather's study. The dim lighting added to the atmosphere, casting long shadows that danced on the walls as he moved. As he moved deeper into the room, he noticed a faint glimmer coming from the far end. It was subtle at first, barely noticeable amidst the shadows, but as he drew closer, the glimmer grew brighter, beckoning him to investigate. His curiosity piqued, he quickened his pace, eager to discover the source of the light. It was a single ray of moonlight falling on a small, ornate box on a table. The moonlight seemed to give the box an ethereal glow, highlighting its intricate design. The table itself was unremarkable, but the box stood out, as if it were waiting for him to find it. The box was old, made of dark wood, and etched with strange symbols. Each symbol seemed to pulse with a hidden energy, drawing him in. He reached out to touch the box, feeling the rough texture of the wood beneath his fingers. The symbols were unlike anything he had ever seen before, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the box held some kind of secret. What could be inside, he wondered, his mind racing with possibilities. The library, once a place of comfort, now felt like a gateway to something unknown, something magical. He reached for the box, his fingers brushing against the cool metal of a hidden latch. As he opened it, a musty scent wafted up, the smell of aged parchment and forgotten things. Inside, nestled in crimson velvet, was a silver key, The key felt cold in his hand, heavier than it looked. He turned it over, examining its intricate design. It was then he noticed a faint inscription etched into the handle: "The heart of the house holds the truth." A sound pierced the silence, a haunting melody drifting from somewhere deep within the house. It was a piano, its notes echoing through the halls like mournful cries. He followed the sound, his heart pounding in his chest. The music led him to a grand ballroom, its once polished floor now covered in dust. And there in the center of the room stood a magnificent grand piano. Its keys were moving, playing a melody untouched by human hands. He stood there for a long time, listening to the ghostly music, his fear giving way to a strange sense of awe. He was no longer alone in his grandfather's house. He was surrounded by secrets, by mysteries that whispered to him from the shadows. As the music faded, he made a decision. He wouldn't run from the shadows. He would unravel the mysteries of this house piece by piece until he uncovered the truth about his grandfather's legacy. The night was far from over. The house held its breath, waiting for him to take the next step, to unlock the secrets it had guarded for so long. The key felt heavy in his pocket, a tangible reminder of the journey that lay ahead. This was only the beginning. The mansion, he realized, was more than just bricks and mortar. It was a vessel, a keeper of stories untold, and Aboud, the sole heir to its legacy, was ready to listen.